Masechet Sanhedrin, Daf Ayin Aleph. Next Mishnah. Ganab Mishel Aviv Achal B'Reshut Aviv. Mishel Acherim V'Achal B'Reshut Acherim. Mishel Acherim V'Achal B'Reshut Aviv. Eno Naasa Ben Sorer Moreh Ad Sheignob Mishel Aviv V'Yochal B'Reshut Acherim. We're describing the requirements in order to be killed as a Ben Sorer Umoreh. The boy has to steal from his father and eat it in someone else's property. Any other combination, he will be exempt. If he steals from his father but eats it in the house of his father, or from others and eats it elsewhere, or he steals from elsewhere and eats it in his father's house, then he is not a Ben Sorer Moreh. He has to steal from his father, go and buy meat and wine, and eat it within his father's property. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda Omer Ad Sheignom Bishel Aviv Umishel Imo. Rabbi Yehuda says an added requirement: he has to steal both from his father and from his mother. Now let's explain each one, what the reason is. If he steals from his father and eats it in the property of his father, so even though it's shechiach, it's easy to steal from his father and stay in the father's property, so it's easy to do because it's right there, it's local, it's where he lives, but he's going to be afraid that his father will see him and catch him. And so, therefore, it's unlikely that he will repeat this often and stay home because he will be afraid. And Mishel Acherim V'Achal B'Reshut Acherim, if he steals from others and eats it also in the property of others, Afagav de la Be'it. Now here you don't have a fear factor because his father's not around. But lo shechiach leh, but it's not accessible to him to be able to go and steal all the time from other people. That would be hard. So therefore, we're also not worried about him repeating this often. And all the more so if he steals from other people where that's not accessible to him, to have to go and find other people's hiding spots where they have valuables, and then he's going to go and buy meat and wine and eat it at home, and at home he's afraid of his father. So here's two things that will stop him from repeating this in the future. So therefore, we don't have to worry about his future behavior, and he's not going to be a Ben Sorer Moreh. He is only killed as a Ben Sorer Moreh if he steals from his father, and then he goes and eats it, and buys meat and wine and eats it in someone else's property. Because his father's money is accessible to him, so it's easy for him to steal again, and he's eating it elsewhere where his father is not going to see him, and he's not afraid. And so this is a worrisome behavior because it can be easily repeated. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Ad Sheignom Bishel Aviv Umishel Imo. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda says he has to steal from his father and from his mother. Imo min aleh. And now his question is, mother, where is she getting money from? Ma shekanta isha kana ba'ala. Whatever she acquires is acquired by the husband. That's built into the ketubah, that the husband, pays for all of the expenses of the house, and he has the responsibility to feed, clothe, give shelter to his wife. And the other way around, if the wife has a job, any money she makes goes to the husband. So she doesn't really have her own money. How could the son steal from the mother if whatever she acquires goes to the husband? Says he steals from a meal that has been prepared for the father and mother. They prepared some dinner for themselves, and there's two steaks, one for the father, one for the mother, and then the son goes and steals both of them. So since one was designated to be eaten by the mother, that's now her property. Hold on. Rav Huna said that one is only liable if he buys meat and wine for a cheap price. So that means he can't just steal the meat itself and the wine itself that belong to his parents. He has to steal money. So we're back to the problem. How's the mother going to have money? So rather say, what we meant in this answer is money set aside for a meal. They set aside $20 for the meal tonight, and they were going to buy some steaks and whatever they were going to buy. And so since it was already designated, and half of that money would be for the mother's meal and half for the father's meal, and the son steals that money, since it was already designated for the dinner for the mom and the dad, so that would be stealing from the mother also because it was designated. That's all good. One answer. Or there is another way for a wife to be able to have property, and that's if someone else gives it to her and says, I am giving you this item or this money on condition that your husband does not have any right to it. If you give something on that condition, then that will be her own property. So she can have it, she keeps it with her, and if the son then steals that money, and also from the father, then he would be liable, according to the Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda. Next Mishnah, Haya abiv rosev imo ena rosa. Abiv eno rosev imo rosa, eno naaseh ben sorer morachiu shenehem rosim. If the father wanted to kill the child, but the mother didn't, or the mother did, and the father did not want to, he's not a ben sorer moreh until both the father and mother agree, yeah, this kid is totally unruly, and we're bringing him and we're charging him as a ben sorer moreh. Rabbi Yehuda omer, im lo hayata imo reuya le'abiv eno naaseh ben sorer moreh. Rabbi Yehuda says, if the mother was not suitable for the father, then it's not going to be a ben sorer moreh. What does that mean, suitable? Mai ena reuya, ile ma chayav kiritot v'chayav mitot betin, sof sof abu ninhu, ime ninhu. If you mean it's not suitable, means that they weren't allowed to be married, like there's isur karet between them, or chayab mita, if it's a certain incest, they're closely related. In that case, the marriage actually would not be a marriage. Even if they do a whole kiddushin and pay for a big wedding, still they aren't actually married. But that shouldn't matter, because nevertheless, the father is the father and the mother is this boy's mother. So they're still the parents, even though they're not married and even though they're not allowed to marry each other, or have relations with each other. But that shouldn't make a difference, because they are still the parents. And so that's not what it means, fitting for each other. Ela b'shava le'abiv kamar tanyana mehachi Rabbi Yehuda omer, im lo heta imo shava le'abiv bekol b'mar'eh bekoma eno naaseh ben sorer umoreh. But rather it means that they have to be identical. And there's a braita that supports this and elaborates, according to Rabbi Yehuda, if the mother was not equal to the father in their voices have to sound identical, that when you hear them from another room, they sound the same. They have to look the same, and they have to be the same height. If you don't have all those requirements, if the father is taller than the mother, if they sound different, if they look different, then there's no ben sorer moreh law. Enenu shameya bekolenu midekol ba'enan shavin marevekoma name ba'inan shavin. Because they come to court and it says this boy is not listening to our voice. Kolenu, so our voice. So that means that they have the same voice. Kol shelanu. So therefore they have to sound exactly the same, and if they have to sound the same, that means they have to look the same and be the same height. I guess the height and size of a person will affect their voice. So if they have exactly the same voice, they would have to be the same build. And in general, since same voice indicates also same in other ways as well. Keman azla hadetanya ben sorer moreh lo haya velo atid lehiyot velama nichtab derosh vekabel sachar keman keRabbi Yehuda. According to whom who's the author of the following beraita? The ben sorer moreh never happened and never will happen. And so why was it written in the Torah if it's never going to happen? So that we can learn from it, and we will get reward of Talmud Torah. And there are important lessons in it. There's lots of important lessons about bringing up children and making sure parents are on the same page together when there's differences between parents. Not that they have to look exactly the same, but when parents are fighting, then that can or have different views on things and don't get along, and mixed messages to kids. When kids start off in a bad way, then it's likely that they're going to continue in a bad way. You should intervene, maybe bring others to help intervene. There's all kinds of lessons one can learn from ben sorer moreh, even though it never happened and never will happen. Who says this beraita? It is Rabbi Yehuda, who says they have to look exactly the same and sound and be the same height, and that is not really possible to happen. Rabbi Shimon, he detanya, Rabbi Shimon, v'chim mipnei shachal zeh tartim al basar, v'shatach chatzi log yayin, ha'italki, aviv imon mosin oto lisok lo. Others say, or another answer is that this beraita is Rabbi Shimon. According to him also, it could never happen, because he asked, does it make sense that just because this boy ate this amount of meat and drank half a log of wine, of Italian wine, and father and mother should be able to bring him out and have him stoned? Doesn't make any sense. So, okay, he ate some meat and wine. As bad as that, he stole. Okay, so we understand it's pretty bad. But go and stone him? This seems over the top. Rather, no, this never happened and never will happen, and it was only written to learn from it. That's what Rabbi Shimon says explicitly, so he could also be the author of that baraita. However, Rabbi Yonatan disagrees. He says, I saw a Ben Sodamoreh, I sat on the grave after he was killed. I witnessed it myself, so according to Rabbi Yonatan, it actually did happen. Now we're going to mention a couple of other things that some say never happened and some say did happen. There's a Braita that says a whole city that all follows idolatry, and that means you go and kill everybody in the city and burn all the property in the middle. That never happened and never will happen. And so why was it written? To learn about it and get merit, and we learn things from it, right? It's possible we have to worry about society as a whole, not just individuals going and sinning and following idolatry, but a whole city. What do we do about this? And we have to be concerned. Keman ke Rabbi Eliezer de Tanya. Rabbi Eliezer omer kol ir sheyesh ba afilu mezuzah achat ena naaset ir hanidachat. So who is the author of this baraita? It is Rabbi Eliezer, because he says that if in the city there's even one mezuzah, then you don't declare it to be an ir hanidachat. Maybe one mezuzah will save the day, because someone will walk by. The Gemara is going to give a different answer, but here's one possible answer, right? Someone will walk by and look and see the mezuzah and be reminded, oh, Hashem is one. You're not allowed to do idols. And he'll go tell his friend, look, the mezuzah. Remember that law, right? Remember the Torah. And maybe the one mezuzah will be able to bring the whole city into teshubah. So if there's even one mezuzah, there's hope, and don't destroy the city. But what's the source? My Tama Amar Kira. Ve'et kol shelatik bos ve'toch rechoba ve'sarafta ba'esh. The pasuk says you take all of the property into the city square and you burn it with fire. Ve'kavan de'ika mezuzah lo efshar dichtiv lo tasun ken laHashem Elokechem. And if there's a mezuzah there, you can't burn a mezuzah, right? As it says, you shall destroy idolatrous altars and break their pillows and burn Asherah. Asherah things you have to burn, but do not do so to Hashem. So you're not allowed to desecrate holy things, and so one would not be allowed to destroy that mezuzah, and therefore any city is going to have one mezuzah, not one mezuzah. The Chabad will have a mezuzah. It means there's going to be one there. Someone will have it, and therefore you can't destroy the city. Amar Rabbi Yonatan, ani re'itiha ve'yashabti al tila. Rabbi Yonatan again says, I saw a city that was destroyed as a Yinayidachet, and I sat on the ruins. I sat on top of the city after it was all destroyed and burnt. And so he testifies that it did happen. Keman azlah detanya, bait hamenuga lo haya, velo atid lehiyot, velama nichtab, zerosh vekabel sachar. There's also a braita that says that a leprous house, that you go into a house and you see there's some kind of mark on the wall, and the Kohen comes and says it's a leprous house, and they try to fix it. They replace that area, but it comes back and it spreads, and they destroy the house. So there's an opinion that says this never happened. And why was it written? In order to learn it and get merit by it. In fact, there is a reading of it in the Midrash that says the leprous house is compared to the Bet HaMikdash, and the Kohen comes and checks it. That's referring to Yirmiyah, who was also a Kohen and a Navi, and he said, there's a problem here. There's sin in the house. One has to remove the corruption, the sin from the Bet HaMikdash, and you do it, but it doesn't work, and it spreads, and then the house is decreed that it has to be destroyed. That's the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, and so on. So you see that the rabbis elsewhere, in fact, do give derashot to all of these laws, and one learns many, many important things from them. You can learn lots of things, literarily, metaphorically, as they in fact do in midrashim. So just because it never happened doesn't mean there's no reason to put it in. Sometimes the theoretical laws are the most interesting and the most impactful, precisely because they're theoretical. We can learn many important lessons from them. Anyway, who's the author of this baraita? Keman ke Rabbi Elazar b'Rabbi Shimon ditnan. Rabbi Elazar b'Rabbi Shimon omer le'olam en habayit hameh ad sheyira'eh kishtei gerisin al shetei avanim b'shtei ketalim b'keren zavit orko kishnayim gerisin v'rochbo kegeris. It would be Rabbi Elazar b'Rabbi Shimon, who says in the Mishnah Masechet Negaim that a house ought to become impure with sarat, has to have a mark the size of 2 split beans. Here's a bean. And it's on 2 stones, on 2 walls, and it's on the corner, between right in on the corner, so it covers 2 walls, and it has to be the size of 2 split beans in length and 1 split bean in width. Okay, it has to be very, very precise in where it is and how big it is. And so since it's never going to be exactly that, if it's a little bigger, a little smaller, it's not on the corner, then it's not going to fill this requirement. And therefore, it's basically impossible for this ever to happen. What's his source? Because in the paragraph there it says sometimes kir, and it also says kirot, singular and plural. So which one is it? How could it be both one wall and many walls? Oh, it must be a corner, which is, it's 2 walls, but it's also continuous, so it's like one wall. Tanya, Amar Rabbi Eliezer b'Rabbi Sadok, Makom haya b'tchum Azah, ve'yu korin oto churbata segirta. And here again, we do have a source that there was such a place because there was a place near Gaza, and it was called the leprous ruin. So it means that there was a house there that had sarat, and it was destroyed. So apparently, at one time at least, this did happen. Amar Rabbi Shimon ish kefar Akko, Pam achat halachti legaliל וראיתי מקום שמסיינים אותו ואמרו הבנים מנוגעות Pinu Lesham. And another testimony of Rabbi Shimon from the village of Akko. So one time he was walking to the Galilee and he saw a place that was being marked off as impure, right? Don't come here. Kohanim, anyone who's tahor, don't come here. And they said, because there were stones that had sarat from a house that were removed and put there. So we see that there is a testimony that there was another place that had sarat habayit. And so for each of these, there are opinions that all of these things happened, but there are also opinions that say that none of these 3 laws ever happen or ever will happen. Next Mishnah, Haya echad mehem gidem, o chiger, o ilem, o soma, o cheresh, eno naaseh ben sorer umoreh. If either the father or the mother of the ben sorer umoreh was missing hands, or was lame, or mute, or blind, or deaf, then the son will not be killed as a ben sorer umoreh. Why? Shene'emar v'tafsu bo aviv imo v'lo gidemin. It says that the parents have to grab hold of him. Well, they need their hands to grab hold of him, and they both have to do that. So therefore, if either of them is missing hands, then ben sorer moreh cannot be fulfilled. And it says ve'osio v'lo chigirin. They have to bring him out to the court. So that means they have to be able to walk well. If they can't walk, then how are they going to bring him out? Ve'amiru v'lo ilemin, and they have to say a statement to the court. All right, this our son, he's not good. So if they are mute, then they can't do that. Benenu zeh v'lo somin. Zeh, always in the rabbinic midrash, means something that you're pointing to and looking at. And so they have to point to this, and this our son. And if they can't see, then they can't point to this son. He's not listening to our voice. And so that means if they're deaf, then they can't hear if the son answers, yes, I'll do it, no, I won't do it. And so they can't make him a ben sorer moreh. So you see, we're following everything very, very precisely and literally, and if we can't fulfill every aspect of the pasuk, then we cannot give capital punishment. And he's admonished before 3 people, and he's flogged. First, he's given lashes before he's killed. So good lashes, and then he is given a second chance. Right? Here's a warning. If he goes again and sins, as does all the things that a ben sorer moreh needs to do to get that status, then he's brought to a court of 23. So for lashes, we just need 3 judges. For capital punishment, we need 23. And he's not going to be stoned unless the original 3 judges are also present, since it says benenu zeh, this our son, meaning the very same one who was flogged before you. So you already know him, and you were there for the warning and the flogging. And now look, he did it again. So you need the same 3 people there among the 23. Shemat mina ba'ainan kera kedichtib shanehachad kula kera titerahu. So we can learn from this part of the Mishnah that not here and in general, you have to fulfill the pasuk exactly as written. This will apply to many other things. When a pasuk says something, it's just giving an example, like this, or it could be a little different. It would still be the same outcome and the same judgment, or do you have to do it? Is it extremely precise? So over here, You're following everything exactly precisely. If they don't have hands, so they can't grab onto him, or maybe it's just expressing a general. No, we don't say take it as a generality, but totally literally. So does that mean that in all other places also we would take everything literally and have to fulfill exactly what the pasuk says in order for that punishment to be given, whatever the case is? So we say no. This case is different because this whole pasuk is extra. Why do you have to tell me how the father and son the father and the mother bring the kid to court? Obviously, if they're going to be judged, somehow they have to get to court. So you don't really have to say that they bring the son to court. Somehow they're going to get there, right, one way or another. So really the pasuk doesn't have to say anything, and just say if parents have a ben sorer moreh, the court will do this, right? And then it doesn't really matter how they get there. So the fact that pasuk goes out of its way to explain in detail what they say, how they grab him, how they bring him there, it means that we have to follow this pasuk precisely. But in other cases that where it's not an extra pasuk, that would not be so. Matrin bifne shelosha lamali. Now it says that you have to warn him in front of three. Why do you need three? Bitresagyash, two should be sufficient as witnesses that we warned him. Amar Abaye hachika amar matrin bo bifne shenayim malkino to bifne shelosha. Abaye says yes, indeed you're right. This is what the Mishnah means to teach, that the warning is in front of two witnesses, but the lashes is by three judges. So because to give someone lashes, you need a judgment, and there has to be at least three judges. Malkut ben sorer moreh hecha ketiba. What's the source that a ben sorer moreh gets lashes first for the first offense? Only the second offense he gets capital punishment. Kedir bi abhu damar bi abhu. Lamanu veyiseru me veyiseru. Veyiseru mi ben uben mi bin. Vaya im bin hakot harasha. Oh, this is from a multiple gezerah shava linkage at Rabbi Abhu taught. He says we learned v'yiseru that it says regarding mosi shem ra. If a husband says, oh, there was no betulim, and turns out he's lying, so it says v'yiseru there. And it also says v'yiseru regarding ben sorer moreh. And in ben sorer moreh it also says v'yiseru, and it says ben. Now the truth is we don't need the first one. The first one is actually teaching us something extra. Rabbi Abhu probably said this in the context of mosi shem ra, and so we're going to learn something extra, that mosi shem ra also will get lashes. If a husband falsely accuses his bride of not having betulim, then he will get lashes. We learn that because it says v'yisiru there, and it says it regarding ben sorer moreh, and regarding ben sorer it says ben, and ben is the same letters as bin. And the Torah, when it talks about lashes, it says bin hakot harasha, if the wicked man deserves lashes. So we connect all these words together, and that's how we know that a ben sorer moreh will get lashes. Chazar v'kilkel nidon b-23 hay miba'ele zeh v'lo somin. The Mishnah teaches that if he has a second offense, this ben sorer moreh, after he gets lashes, then you bring him back and need 23 judges, but the original 3 have to also be there, because it says benenu zeh, this, our son, who you know because you gave him lashes. So the original 3 have to be present. Now we ask, wait, this word zeh we already used in the Mishnah to teach that the parents can't be blind because they have to be able to see the child. So we already used up this zeh. How could you learn it to teach something else? Oh, you're right. If you only wanted to learn one of these, you could have said benenu hu. This is our son, right? And you gave him lashes already, so you could say benenu hu, and we would know that the same 3 judges have to be there for the second judgment. But the fact that it doesn't say hu, it says zeh, we can actually learn 2 things also, that the parents have to be able to see the child. Next Mishnah. Barach ad shelo nigmar dino ve'achar kach hikiv zakan tachton patur. Let's say they had a ben sorer moreh. He did all the wrong things that he had to do to qualify to be a ben sorer moreh, and he's brought to court, and the court is discussing it. And in the middle, while the court is deliberating, the kid runs away, and we don't find him until after his beard rounds out. So then patur, because at that point he's past the window when he could be a ben sorer moreh. So even though he did the sin sins while he was within the window between two hairs and rounding out the beard, but the judgment wasn't finalized yet. So we can't finalize the judgment if he now got older. However, if they brought him to court and they gave the verdict during the window before he rounded out his beard, they gave the verdict liable to capital punishment, and then he ran away, and then he's caught. So then he will be killed because the verdict was already given, and that's it. Once the verdict is already given, as the Gemara will explain, he's already considered a dead man. He's a dead man running, and so whenever they catch him, they will give him capital punishment then, even if he's older. Amar Rabbi Chanina ben Noach sheberach et Hashem v'achar kach nitgayer patur hoil v'nishtana dino v'nishtana mitato. So Rabbi Chanina teaches a related law. We're going to bring this Mishnah to try as a proof or disproof to the statement of Rabbi Chanina. You have a ben Noach, and he cursed the name of Hashem, which is one of Sheva Mitzvot b'nei Noach. That gets the death penalty. Any non-Jew who violates Sheva Mitzvot b'nei Noach gets killed by the sword, by beheading. So he would be liable to beheading. However, in the meantime, sometime during the trial, he converts, and now he's Jewish. Now he gets no punishment. Why? Because his law changed and the sentencing changed. There are, in fact, multiple differences between both the court procedure and the type of capital punishment that's given. In terms of court procedure, for a non-Jew, if he comes to court, you only need one judge and one witness, and you don't need warning. Whereas for a Jew, you need 23 judges and 2 witnesses, and there has to be warning before. So the court procedure changed, and also the type of death penalty changed. When he was a ben Noach, he would be killed by beheading. But if a Jew does the same sin of cursing the name of Hashem, then he's killed by stoning. So now the new laws cannot apply to him, and we can't apply the old laws because he's Jewish. So even though he did the sin that required capital punishment as a ben Noach, but now he's not a ben Noach, so we can't try him under ben Noach law, and he didn't do the sin as a Jew, so we can't try him under Jewish law. So therefore, he is not killed. All right, this is a good way out of from getting out of capital punishment. Just go and convert. Nema mesaya le barach ad shelo nigmar dino v'achar kach hikif zakan tachton patur. My ta'ama la mishum damrina no'il v'ishtane. So maybe we could bring a proof for the Chanina from the beginning of our Mishnah that says if this Ben Soreh Moreh he sinned before he rounded out his beard, and then he ran away before the period of judgment, before the final verdict, and then afterwards, while he was running away, he rounded out his beard, then that's it. We don't try him again. He doesn't get capital punishment. Why? Is it not because he changed, right? As he changed his legal status, and so that's why we cannot no longer try him. That's the same thing as the Ben Noach. He was Ben Noach, now he's Jewish, so his legal status changed, and that's why he is patur. So here is a Mishnah that is a similar case to the Bichanina, so this would be a good proof. And we answer, La shane hache hacha diavad hashta la bar ketalahu. No, it's different here in the case of Ben Soreh Moreh, because if he would violate the same sin now as an adult, then he would not be liable to capital punishment. If an adult steals from his parents and eats meat and wine and all that, does all the Ben Soreh Moreh things, the law of capital punishment does not apply to him. So that's why he's exempt. That's different from the convert who converts to Judaism, where cursing the name of Hashem is given capital punishment both as a Ben Noach and also as a Jew. So if you only had the Mishnah, you can still say that a Ben Soreh Moreh, he gets off the hook because he's no longer liable to capital punishment as an adult. But a convert is still liable to capital punishment. So maybe we would try him as a Jew still and give him capital punishment for the sin that he did when he was a Ben Noach. So there's no proof from this clause. Tashema. Let's quote the second part of our Mishnah as a disproof. אם מי שנגמר דינו ברח ואחר כך הקיף זקן התחתון חייב. נגמר דינו כאמרת, נגמר דינו גברה כתילהו. So the question is, if he was given a final verdict, the Ben Sorer Moreh, before he rounded out his beard, and then they said capital punishment, and then he ran away, and then we catch him, even though we catch him later, when he's an adult, he is given capital punishment, even though his status changed. So that means he gets capital punishment even though his status changes. This is a disproof to Rabbi Chanina, right? And so as here too, we should say that since he did the sin while he was a ben Noach, and even though now he is a Jew and aspects of his law and his legal status changed, he should be chayav, and we should still give him capital punishment, right? Just like we give the ben Sorer Moreh capital punishment. And we answer, no, this is not a disproof because this is nigmar dino. In this case, the verdict was already given. If the verdict is already given, then he is a dead man running. He's considered basically already dead. If someone would kill him at that point, would they be considered a murderer? Well, good question. Probably not. And so therefore, since he's already dead, it's just a matter of going through with the actual execution. So that's different from a case where he was not given a verdict yet, and the status changes in between. So there's no proof, and there's also no disproof from our Mishnah. We now challenge Rabbi Chanina's rule from a baraita. Tashema ben Noach shekat chavero bal eshet chavero mitgayer patur. If a ben Noach kills another ben Noach, or he commits adultery with a wife of a ben Noach, and then he converts, so he is patur, even though while he was a ben Noach, if he was brought to trial, he would be liable to capital punishment. But now he has a new situation and he is patur, and he will be judged as a Jew. And if a Jew does either of these things to a non-Jew, he does not get capital punishment in a Jewish court, which won't have jurisdiction over it. However, the question is from the next part. Asa can be Israel v'nitgayer hayav. If a ben Noach, before he converted, either killed a Jew or committed adultery with a Jewish wife, with the wife of a Jew, and then he converted, he is liable. And we ask, Ve'amai, why? According to Rabbi Chanina, he says a rule that once you change legal status, then that's it. You're no longer liable. So since you changed a status from a non-Jew to a Jew, so he should no longer be liable. Why does this baraita say chayav? And the answer is dino umitato ba'inan. Remember, Rabbi Chanina says we only apply this rule that once you changed if everything changes about the case from what it was to what it is now, the procedure and the type of capital punishment. Now, the procedure is always going to be different from being a non-Jew to a Jew. In any capital case, as a non-Jew, there's only one judge, one witness, no warning, and now he needs 23 judges, 2 witnesses, and there has to be warning. So that for sure is a change, but you also need there to be a change in the type of capital punishment. And in this case, the procedure changed. However, the type of death penalty did not change, as we'll see. Now, this is true regarding murder. If he committed murder when he was a ben Noach, he would have been liable to beheading. All Bnei Noach, according to the majority opinion, get a saif for any capital punishment that they do. And now that he's a Jew also is liable to the same punishment of beheading. And so therefore, this is the same. So Rabbi Chanina's ruling, he never applied it to a case where the capital punishment is the same. So Rabbi Chanina would for sure agree that he is still liable because it's the same punishment, even though it's a different procedure, but same punishment, so that continues. But we still have a challenge from this baraita against Rabbi Chanina from the case of adultery, because when a non-Jew commits adultery, he gets the punishment of saif. But when a Jew commits adultery, then he gets strangulation. So this is a different procedure and a different punishment, and therefore, according to the Rabbi Chanina, he should not be liable at all once he converts, and yet the Baraita says he is liable. So how can we explain this according to the Rabbi Chanina? And the answer is, we can explain that not this non-Jew, before he converted, he committed adultery with a Jewish woman who was a Na'ara Me'orasa. She was Na'ara between 12 and 12 and a half, and she was only Me'orasa and not full Nisu'in. And in that case, there is sikila no matter what. For if a Jew does this, if a Jew has adultery with Na'ara Me'orasa, he gets sikila. And we learned that if a non-Jew also does so, then he gets tried in a Jewish court, and he's also given sikila. So here, the procedure is different. It's true once he converts, but the punishment is the same. And so therefore, Rabbi Chanina would agree that he's chayav because the punishment is the same. But this is not a good reading of the Baraita, because look at the words. Veha asa ken b'Yisrael dum yad eshet chabero katane. Baraita says if he does the same thing that he did, it has two parts of the Baraita. The first part is when he does something to a non-Jew, and the second part is when he does the same thing to a Jew. But the problem is there's no parallel, because if the crime to the Jew was Na'ara Me'orasa, there is no parallel to a non-Jew, because in non-Jewish law they don't have erusin. There's just there's only one step, and that's the consummating of the marriage. Then it's recognized as a marriage. But so there's no such thing as a Na'ara Me'orasa if it's done by a non-Jew to a non-Jew, and so that can't fit the Resha, and if there's no case in the Resha, then there's no case in the Sefa either. So, because it has to be Dumya Deshet Chabero Katane, has to be the same as his friend's wife, and if his friend's wife, as a Jew, meaning the non-Jew who sinned with a Jewish person's wife, would be an Na'ara Me'orasa, then there's no parallel to when he's a non-Jew and he commits the same sin with a non-Jew's wife, because there is no Na'ara Me'orasa, so we cannot say that that's the case. Ela kala b'chamura meshach shaycha. Oh, so now we have a chidush that Rabbi Chanina would agree that the punishment will continue through conversion, either if it's the same punishment or if it's a lighter punishment, because a more lenient punishment is included within a more severe punishment. And therefore, when he was a non-Jew, he would get beheaded. That would be the punishment. That's hedeg. And hedeg is more severe than chenek. So since once he converts, now he gets a less severe punishment that will continue, because, right, for sure, he should be at least as liable as when he was a non-Jew, now that he converts. So yes, that will continue in fact. And so we have a good answer. If it's the case of murder, well then that's the same punishment of beheading as a non-Jew and a Jew. So that continues right through conversion, he's chayav. And if it's eshet ish, well then the punishment actually becomes less severe, and the less severe is included. And he was already liable in the more severe. So now it's less severe, he continues. All right, good. So we have an answer to this challenge from the Baraita. However, Hanicha l'Rabbanan d'Amre Saif Chamur. This answer only works according to the majority opinion of Rabbanan, who say that Saif is more chamur than chenek. That is the usual order that we have. Sikila, sirefa, hereg, vachenek. Hereg is Saif. That's the third, and then chenek is the last one. El Rabbi Shimon de'amar, chenek chamur ma'ikal me'amar. However, Rabbi Shimon, remember he switches 1 and 2, and he switches 3 and 4. So he says chenek is actually more severe, and when he was a non-Jew and committed adultery, he got Saif, which was the fourth one, the least severe. And now that he converts, it's going to be chenek, which is what if a Jew commits adultery, it's chenek, which is more severe. And we're not going to go from less severe to more severe. In that case, Rabbi Chanina should say patur. That's it. It doesn't continue once he converts, because there's a change in procedure and a change in the type of capital punishment. So how will we explain this Baraita according to Rabbi Chanina? How will Rabbi Chanina explain this Baraita if we follow the opinion of Rabbi Shimon? Rabbi Shimon savar la ketana de Menashe amar kol mitamura libnei Noach ena ela chenek. Oh, you know what? We can bring in another factor, because Remember that rule that we said that anytime Bnei Noach gets capital punishment, it's always beheading, saif? Actually, there's another opinion. There's a braita from the school of Menashe that says any capital punishment that said Bnei Noach is actually chenek. And in that case, that would work for Eshet Ish. So Bishlama Eshet Ish. So if he committed adultery as while he was a non-Jew with a Jewish woman, he would be liable to chenek. And now that he converts to Judaism, it's still chenek. So that's the same punishment. And if it's the same punishment, Rabbi Chanina says that it continues, and that's why it's chayav. Good. So we solved that case according to Rabbi Shimon. However, but now go back to the case of murder, because originally when he was a non-Jew and he committed murder, he killed a Jew, so he is liable to chenek, right? Because we're following Ben Menashe, that non-Jew always gets chenek, vashta saif. And now that he converts, well, the punishment for murder as a Jew is beheading. So now it's a different type of capital punishment. So why is he chayav? And the answer is kala b'chamora meshach shaycha. Remember, we're following the order of Rabbi Shimon, and he says that we're also applying the rule that if it's a lighter form of punishment, that's included in the more stringent form. And so since beforehand, when he was a non-Jew, it was he was liable to chenek, and chenek is more stringent according to Rabbi Shimon than saif. So now it becomes more lenient. If it's more lenient, then he will agree, Rabbi Chanina will agree that the punishment continues. And so now we solved the problem, that answered the question according to both Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon. Lastly, we have attempted proof. Lema mesaye'a le sarcha v'achar kach bagra tidon bechenek. If you have a nara me'orasa who committed adultery, and so she would be liable to sekila. However, let's say she doesn't get to court and get a verdict while she is a na'ara, but it's only until after she becomes an adult, then she's taken to court. So then her punishment will be chenek, so she'll be tried as an adult. It's only sekila if she's tried while she is a ne'ara. So let's see. Biskila mai ta'amala la mishum deho'il vishtane ishtane v'kol sheken achad ishtane legamre. So how come we don't give her sekila even though she's an adult? Isn't it because since she changed legal status, she went from being a ne'ara to a bogeret, so now she changed the consequences will change, the punishment will change also. Sikila is the worst kind, so that's what she would have gotten as a ne'ara. Once she becomes an adult, so then she doesn't get nothing because chenek is less severe than sikila. And remember, Rabbi Chanina agrees that the less severe is included in the more severe. Therefore, once she becomes an adult, she changes her legal status and her punishment drops down from sikila to chenek. And so that makes sense according to Rabbi Chanina. And if we say that for someone whose status is not changing very much, she's still basically the same. She was Jewish before and is Jewish now. She's changing from Na'ara to Bogeret. And yet you say the punishment does change, all the more so for someone who converted, that they're totally different. The procedures are different, and in the case that Rabbi Chanina mentioned, the punishment is different. So this is a good proof that for sure a big change like that will also change the punishment. So in this a good proof, and the answer is Hamar le Rabbi Chanina letana tene tidon beskila. No, but Rabbi Yochanan, when there was the Tana, that's the professional reciter that memorizes these baraitot. When the Tana repeated this baraita in front of Rabbi Yochanan instructed him to change it. He says, no, the way you memorized it is mistaken. Rather, teneh, you should learn it as tidon biskila, that even though if she sinned and committed adultery as a na'ara, and then she becomes an adult, she still gets tried with sekila. The punishment does not change. Well, if you read it that way, then that would not be a proof for Rabbi Chanina at all. So in that case, it's not a proof. But if you use the original formulation, then it would be a proof. But Rabbi Yochanan already changed it, so therefore we do not have a proof. The next Mishnah teaches Ben Sorer More Nidon Al Shem Sofo. The Ben Sorer More is judged not for what he's done in the past. He didn't do anything so bad to deserve capital punishment, but rather he's judged on account of the future. We can tell that if he follows follows this path that he's on, then he's going to end up committing things that require capital punishment. So we may as well kill him now before he sins. Yamut zakai v'al yamut chayav. Let him die meritorious, innocent, and not die guilty. Shemitatan shel reshaim hana'a lahen v'hana'a la'olam. V'sadikim ra lahem v'ra la'olam. And so we see from here that the death of evil people is good for them and good for everybody else. It's good for them because once they die, they won't do any evil deeds anymore and won't rack up more sins and more punishments. And it's good for everybody else because they won't have to suffer because of those bad things. Whereas death for a righteous person is bad for the righteous person. They don't get a chance to live and do more good things. It's also bad for everybody else that don't get to benefit from what the good deeds that they did. And then we continue a series of things that are like this. Yayin v'shena l'rashaim hana'a lahen v'hana'a la'olam. L'sadikim ra lahem v'ra la'olam. Wine and sleeping is good for wicked people. While they're drunk or sleeping, they're not doing anything bad. So that's good for them. They're not racking up sins and they're not harming other people. Whereas for tzaddikim, it's bad for them and bad for the world because while they're drunk or asleep, they're not going to be able to do good things. So they should try to not get drunk and not sleep more than needed. Pizur l'rashaim hana'a lahen v'hana'a la'olam. Dispersal for wicked people when they're not congregated together, but they go in exile and are all over the place and can't meet each other. That's good for them and good for the world because when they get together, they just do bad things. L'sadikim ra lahen v'ra la'olam. But for tzaddikim, if they can't get together and learn Torah and build organizations and do good things for their communities and for the nation, then it's bad for them and it's bad for everybody else. Kinus l'rashaim lahen v'ra la'olam. Gathering together is bad for wicked people. Whenever they get together, they come up with some plot, some way of causing themselves to add sins and harm other people. But for tzaddikim, it's beneficial for them and beneficial for the rest of the world because when they get together, they make things better. When things are quiet and tranquil, then that's bad for the Shahim because then they use the opportunity, there's nothing else to do, that to cause evil to themselves and to others. Whereas for tzaddikim, if they don't have to be busy with wars and other things, then they can use that time to do good things, and that'll be meritorious for them and beneficial for everybody else. Baraita expands on the Mishnah. Tanya. Rabbi Yosef Gali Omer, V'chi mipnei shachal zeh tartem al basar v'shatach hasi lo yain italki amra Torah yaseh lebeit din lisakel. Rabbi Yosef Gali says, we don't understand this law in the Torah just because this boy went and ate a portion of meat and drank a portion of wine, of Italian wine. The Torah says that he should go and be stoned. I understand he's not going against his parents and is not on best behavior, but stoning seems kind of extreme for that. נכסי אביו, הוא מקש לימודו ואינו מוסה ויוסה לפרשת דרכים ומלסתם את הבריות. Rather, it's because he does deserve it, because the Torah figured out what's going to happen in the end. Since he's doing these things, then you know what's going to happen? He's going to continue stealing from his father. He's going to squander all of his father's property. And then he's going to seek more because he's used to this pleasure. He got addicted to the meat and wine and this lifestyle. And once his father has no more money to steal from, he's going to go out and to the crossroads and rob people. And if they resist, he's going to kill them. And so you see that he is going to lead a bad life, and therefore better for him and for everybody else to stop him now. There's a movie about this when they would arrest people and punish them before they did the crime, because they could tell based on seers that he's going to do the crime. So here is an example where the Torah says that that's okay. Amra Torah yamut zakai v'al yamut chayav shemitatan shel Hashem hana'ah lahem v'hana'ah la'olam. And now this is a repetition similar to the Mishnah, but this is another version in the Baraita. And therefore the Torah says, let him die now when he is innocent and not die guilty, because death for evil people is good for them and good for everybody else. Tzaddikim ra lahem v'ra la'olam. For tzaddikim, It's bad for them to die and bad for everybody else. They miss out on having the benefit of a tzaddik with them. And similarly with sleep and wine is good for the sha'im because they're not doing anything bad, and it's bad for tzaddikim because they're not doing anything good. Quiet in the world is bad for a tzaddikim, because when it's quiet, the best thing for a tzaddik is to keep him busy. If he has to go to work, there's things to do, he'll stay out of trouble. But if things are nice and quiet, then he's just going to end up doing bad to himself and to others. For tzaddikim, if things are nice and quiet, they can do good things, and being dispersed is good for the shayim. Let them all be dispersed and not hang out with each other. They're bad influence upon themselves. Whereas for tzaddikim, when they get together, it's good. So when they're dispersed, that's bad for them and bad for the world. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.